Welcome to Watching Washington, a public affairs program from the Brian Lamb School of Communication at Purdue University. It's Sunday, December 7th, and I'm Paige Gonzalez.
And I'm Connor Sutterly. Here's a recap of the top stories this week. U.S. Army Specialist Sarah Beckstrom and U.S. Air Force Sergeant Andrew Wolf were fired upon in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, November 26th. The suspect in the shooting is an Afghan national who was granted asylum. The Trump administration has halted all citizenship ceremonies. The U.S. is no longer accepting immigrants from Afghanistan, Burundi, Chad, Cuba, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Laos, Libya, Myanmar, Republic of Congo, Sierra Leone, Somalia, Sudan, Togo, Turkmenistan, Venezuela, and Yemen. It remains to be seen when immigration from these countries will continue.
Costco is now one of the largest companies to sue the Trump administration over tariffs. The company hopes to secure a refund if the Supreme Court declares the new import duties illegal. Costco executives in May had said that about a third of what it sells in the U.S. comes from abroad, mostly non-food items. The Supreme Court is weighing the future of Trump's tariffs on nearly all imports. Lower courts had previously found that Trump had improperly used the emergency economic powers to set most of the new levies. Dozens of companies across industries have filed lawsuits to seek refunds in the event that the Supreme Court finds Trump's tariffs illegal. Trump claims he had an almost unlimited right to impose tariffs under the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act, but has already lost twice in court.
A special election was held this past Tuesday to fill an open seat in Tennessee's 7th District, which includes a Nashville area. Republican candidate Matt Van Epps won over Democrat candidate Afton Ben by 9 points. His victory was tighter than comfortable, according to Politico. This is considering the past election results in the district. In the 2024 election, President Trump won the same district by over 20 points. Republicans have dominated the House seat for decades, winning by at least 20 points since the election in the year 2000. According to the Tennessee Lookout, super PACs on both sides of the aisle spent a total of over $7 million during the race, the biggest contributor being the super PAC MAGA Inc. The race garnered national attention as midterm elections approach in 2026.
The state of Minnesota is under multiple federal investigations for fraud and the misuse of taxpayer dollars. The first fraud investigations began in 2022 after it was discovered that millions of dollars meant for COVID relief were embezzled by the nonprofit Feeding Our Future. Since then, more fraud investigations have been opened, with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announcing earlier this week that he was looking into claims that taxpayer dollars in Minnesota were used to fund a terrorist group. It's estimated that upwards of $1 billion of taxpayer funds have been misused and stolen in the state of Minnesota. A bill to redistrict Indiana has been sent to the State House. The bill was approved by the House Elections Committee on December 2nd. 8 Republicans voted yes, while 4 Democrats and 1 Republican voted no. These votes come at a turbulent time, where President Trump threatened to primary lawmakers who resisted redistricting. And lawmakers on both sides have been violently threatened for their position on redistricting. The current map has been used since 2021 and has 2 blue districts and 7 red districts, whereas the proposed map would give Republican control of all 9 seats and split Indianapolis into 4 districts.
Lawmakers are calling this redistricting effort unprecedented. The last time Indiana redrew its districts, legislators held hearings across the state to gather public input, and the Elections Committee heard 2 days of testimony. The public has expressed its concern about the proposed map, which was drawn with the help from the National Republican Redistricting Trust. Former lawmakers and general members of the public showed up at the State House last Monday to protest. If the bill passes the House, it will then go to the Senate on December 8th. An independent review of Charlie Kirk's assassination at Utah Valley University and the school's security protocols is expected to begin in January and conclude before the summer of 2026. The development comes as the shooting of Kirk has drawn a new focus to security protocols and police resources on college campuses across the state. The review will include a report prepared for the public. Investigators are expected to conduct interviews with university leaders, law enforcement employees, and students. They are also tasked with looking over video, emergency plans, training records, incident logs, and other relevant records. In doing so, this may help to piece together a timeline. Utah Governor Spencer Cox told reporters last week that, quote, "We want to make sure we have the funding necessary to keep our kids safe on campus." While the university's request doesn't explicitly mention Kirk or reference a shooting, it says the purpose of the probe is to analyze what happened before and after an incident on September 10th. The newly formed State Task Force on Higher Education and Public Safety is set to hold their first meeting on December 8th to evaluate policies across Utah's public colleges.
On Tuesday, President Donald Trump signed the Taiwan Assurance Implementation Act. The law is an amendment to the original 2020 Taiwan Assurance Act, which was meant to conduct a one-time review of U.S.-Taiwan governing relations. Now, the bill signed by President Trump requires the State Department to conduct a review, quote, not less than every 5 years. The department must then submit a report for the Senate and House Foreign Relations Committees, quote, not later than 90 days after completing the review. According to Taiwanese Presidential Office spokeswoman Karen Kuo, the signing of the bill, quote, affirmed the value exchanged between the two nations' officials, supported closer bilateral ties, and stood as a symbol for democracy, freedom, and respect for human rights, end quote. However, Beijing's foreign ministry spokesperson Lin Jian, quote, firmly opposes Washington's official interaction with China's Taiwan region in any form, calling it, quote, the first red line that must not be crossed. With the signing of the bill establishing a permanent extension of the State Department's interactions with Taiwan, Washington remains firm on its position to continue interacting with Taiwan and China separately.
Up next, U.S. and Russian officials held rare peace talks to end the war in Ukraine.
Plus, defense chiefs face backlash after deadly second strike on a Venezuelan drug boat. Stay with us. More Watching Washington next.
Hola from Spain. G'day, mates.
Buenos dias.
Bonjour.
Hello from South Korea.
I'm studying abroad in Valencia, Spain this semester.
I'm studying abroad in Sydney, Australia.
I'm studying abroad in Madrid, Spain.
Studying at Seoul National University.
At Issai Supero in Toulouse, France.
And I'm really getting to enjoy meeting all the new people and the culture.
How different it is from Purdue University.
It is an absolutely fantastic experience.
I'm living my best life.
I can't wait to see you guys all overseas soon. A bientôt.
Adios.
Nos vemos de España.
I'm Rachel. I'm 19 years old. I'm a sophomore in computer engineering here at Purdue, and I'm the president of DAO. So DAO stands for Dance All Out, and it's kind of like a community where all dancers of different skill levels and artists have a space to express themselves and be artists and perform. We perform at things like the AAA Night Market and the VA, the Variation Showcase, at the end of the semester. We even had our own showcase last year, and that was really exciting. DAO not only offers like weekly classes and performance opportunities, but kind of like a really strong community/family to do it with. When people talk about college, or when you see in like coming of age movies, it's all about like the main character finding like the place where they belong, whether it's in school or like extracurricular or like with their friends or another hobby. But like this could be the place where you find like your coming of age moment, and like it could be the place where you discover like a big part of your life.
U.S. officials met with Russian President Vladimir Putin to negotiate a peace deal to end Russia's war with Ukraine, but no such deal was agreed upon. U.S. President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner represented the United States in the negotiations. Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov spoke on the state of the negotiations.
A compromise option was not found, but some of the American proposals look more or less acceptable, though they need to be discussed. Some of the formulations that were offered to us do not suit us, meaning the work will continue.
While the Kremlin has not stated which points of the deal are contested, previous points Russia has contested are Ukraine's intentions to join NATO and which parts of the nation are to be conceded to Russia. A meeting between Trump and Putin has not yet been made, but the Kremlin has expressed a willingness to continue negotiations. Before the meeting with U.S. officials, however, Putin made headlines when speaking to reporters.
We're not planning to go to war with Europe. I have already spoken about this 100 times. But if Europe suddenly wants to go to war with us and starts, we're ready right now.
Putin has accused European nations of attempting to block a peace deal by making certain unacceptable demands of Russia. Negotiations between the U.S. and Russia are set to continue over the coming weeks, and, should the negotiations go well, Ukraine will send delegates to complete a deal.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and top Naval Admiral Frank Bradley are facing severe criticism after ordering a second strike on a Venezuelan drug boat. The strikes occurred on September 2nd in the Caribbean Sea. The second strike killed 2 survivors from the initial strike, raising concerns among Democrats that the action could be considered a war crime. According to a report from the Washington Post, Hegseth allegedly ordered the military to kill all survivors. Hegseth's chief spokesman, Sean Parnell, says the order is part of a fake news narrative. Let's take a look at what Hegseth said in a press briefing.
I watched that first strike live. As you can imagine, at the Department of War, we got a lot of things to do. So I didn't stick around for the hour and 2 hours, whatever, where all the sensitive site exploitation digitally occurs. So I moved on to my next meeting. A couple of hours later, I learned that that commander had made which he had the complete authority to do, and by the way, Admiral Bradley made the correct decision to ultimately sink the boat and eliminate the threat. He sunk the boat, and eliminated the threat. And it was the right call. We have his back.
Congress and the intelligence community are now examining the rationale behind the second strike. Some officials argue that the boat posed an imminent threat because Trump declared earlier this year that drug cartels would be labeled as foreign terrorist organizations. Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee heard from Bradley yesterday, where Bradley stated that he did not receive the kill them all order. Democrats stated how they are deeply disturbed by this decision and are worried about Hegseth's judgment as secretary. However, Republicans fought back to say the call was expected of both Hegseth and Bradley.
This week, the U.S. and U.K. have come to an agreement on pharmaceutical shipment into America. Under the agreement, the U.K. will pay more for medicine through the NHS, and in return, the U.S. will not tax on any pharmaceutical shipments for 3 years. The NHS, also known as the National Health Service, is a publicly funded healthcare system in the United Kingdom. This is the first time in 20 years that the NHS is having to pay more for medicine. This deal is a result of President Donald Trump threatening to raise taxes on imported pharmaceuticals by 100%. White House spokesman Kush Desai said the agreement with the UK was a, quote, historic step towards ensuring that other developed countries finally pay their fair share, end quote. Brand name drug prices in the United States are 3 times as high on average as those in peer nations. Trump officials have said they see higher drug prices in Europe as a crucial way to lowering prices in the United States.
According to a press release from Purdue University, City Bus has announced route reductions and price increases for the 2026 spring semester. After meetings with Purdue student government, Purdue graduate student government, and members of the Action Council for Student Housing and Well-Being, Purdue stated, quote, Purdue will continue to cover 1/2 of the City Bus semester pass cost. which is $125, with reimbursement of $63 per each pass purchased by students, making the cost for each student $62. To get reimbursed, passes must be claimed via the Easy Fare app, only when signed in with a purdue.edu email address. Purdue also reminded students that Purdue Campus Transit, provided in collaboration with SP Plus, is provided free of charge and recently expanded its routes this November.
Purdue has signed a memorandum of understanding with the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, a facility sponsored by the Department of Energy. Purdue Executive Vice President for Research, Dan De Laurentiis, and the Associate Laboratory Director for National Security Sciences at Oak Ridge, Mo Khalil, signed the agreement to further cultivate the research partnership that already exists between the two entities. Goals of the MOU are to improve national security, specifically in the areas of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and cyber-physical security. It also strives to further the domestic production of national security. The collaboration aligns with the Purdue Computes Initiative, which invests resources into improving computer science education and research. Purdue's MOU with the Oak Ridge Lab was finalized this October and is in effect immediately. Our in-studio guest this week is Marion County Council member Michael Paul Hart.
The full interview just ahead on Watching Washington.
Imagine a world where Olympics and Paralympics are unified as one, and where all athletes at all levels have equal opportunities to play and perform at their full potential.
Athletics has been such an influential and transformative aspect of my life. So to me, RISE is about ensuring that every person that has the desire to participate in sport has the opportunity to do so.
This organization is about recognition. We believe in recognizing excellence where it is found, especially in Paralympic sports.
RISE is about driving change in our community and beyond. We hope that through our events and initiatives, we can galvanize people for our cause and inspire them to create an ever-growing network to help achieve our mission.
It's about connecting people of various backgrounds and who truly care about creating meaningful change together.
We develop projects and hold events to bring people together at the interface of inclusivity, sports, and engineering.
Our goal is to promote the equality of all sports and to improve sports performance and accessibility.
Join us so that you can have a major contribution in creating meaningful change.
We have a special guest with us in the studio this week.
Marion County Council member Michael Paul Hart is here to discuss data centers moving into rural communities. Let's go now to Washington's Courtney Bragg, who is standing by with this week's interview.
That's right. We've got Michael Paul Hart here in the studio with us today to discuss data centers moving into rural areas. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Michael.
My pleasure.
So you're a city council member for Marion County. Why don't you just walk us through what your job is a little bit and what it entails?
Certainly. So Indianapolis is unique because we're a city county. So I'm a counselor for both the city of Indianapolis and the county of Marion County. Our day-to-day job, I say a lot of it is land use. So we're looking at zoning, use cases, and really going for or against businesses that want to come to Indianapolis, or particularly in our district. We look at things like funding packages. So are we using tax incentive financing? Are we giving abatements? All of those will come through the council. We also look at things like the budget. We're responsible for approving the annual budget in the city of Indianapolis, which is $1.7 billion annually. And then we have all sorts of municipal corporations that we have to oversee as well. So things like the airport, the convention center, Lucas Oil Stadium, we equally have the responsibility to make sure that their budgets are balanced as well.
Nice. So you also have a background in computer science and information technology. So I'm assuming that you know like what a data center is. But for maybe people who don't know what that is, could you describe what a data center is and why companies like Google would need one?
Certainly. So there's actually a lot of types of data centers. There's more than just one. So what Google was seeking in this case that we'll get into more detail on is a hyperscaler data center. That's not the rule to all data center types. There are also, I actually have a data center right next to my district right now, and it's not a hyperscaler. And so I'll start with that type and then I'll explain all the way up. So we have data centers that are all over the place and are all varying sizes. A lot of the times we'll see them used for what's called high availability and disaster recovery. And I'll give you an example. So if you own a business and you have a data center in location A, and that's where you're running your applications, you're storing information, and you want to make sure that information is redundant, because if something happens here, physical or otherwise, you want it to be backed up in another location, you have a data center for that purpose. And so a lot of the times we'll see data centers that are just providing that high availability, so you can either balance the two workloads between or fail over to the other if one goes down. That wasn't Google's in this instance that we'll talk about. So that's kind of your standard. And then you upgrade to what are called hyperscalers. So hyperscalers are massive, and when people think of the traditional type of data center, when there's these long rows of server racks up and down and flashing lights everywhere, that in your mind you're imagining a hyperscaler. Now, in the other type you'll see servers and things, absolutely, but not cram-packed in like a hyperscaler. A hyperscaler is going to pull in a lot more energy. They're going to use a lot more resources. What they're going to be primarily doing are running large-scale applications, things that we're using today. And the reason we're seeing more come is because we're using more things like ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, and those AI tools. So these hyperscalers are doing things like inferencing, and what that means, it's a fancy word for learning. And they're constantly learning information over and over and over again, so then they can then train on data. And so that's a purpose of a hyperscaler, is to learn and train on data, and then ultimately you can translate that into an application down the line that we're then using on our phones.
So how does that type of data center specifically use and affect its surrounding environment that it's in?
Yeah, so for the big ones, the hyperscalers, right? Why that's so impactful on resources is that, and I'll give the example of the Google one that I was involved in, is they use a lot of electricity because all of these computing components inside are increasingly getting more complex. They're getting hotter because they run more operations more quickly, and they have to stay cool. So you're using both the electricity to run them and the water to cool them. In the case of this data center, a hyperscaler data center, it was going to be 300,000 square feet buildings, so 4 of them. And each one of them would use at a minimum of 1 million gallons of water a day. And then for the amount of electricity, to not talk kilowatts, I'll just make a comparison. 1 day's use would compare to the equivalent of all of Indianapolis in the same day. So we're essentially adding on another city in the city for power consumption, and then up to 4 million gallons of water usage every day. So that's water coming in and water going out.
Wow. So this summer it was revealed to the public that Google was planning on moving into Marion County and putting that type of data center in. What did you see as far as reaction-wise from the public in Marion County, and also what was your reaction to that?
Yeah, so what was really interesting is I knew about the project in the year before in December, and there was an NDA process in this, which, it's funny now I'm obviously here talking to you, so the NDA, non-disclosure agreement, which traditionally means you can't talk about something, it's a moot point at this point, because when Google would try to state their case, they started unveiling everything that was under NDA. So that's why I had a little bit more knowledge of what was going on for a longer time. But the reaction really started about the time you mentioned, but it was, who is it, right? Before they even knew it was Google. They actually didn't know it was Google for maybe 6 months before Google said it was Google. And they knew that there was a petitioning attorney. So a petitioner is the person that's trying to have something happen. And then there's what's called a remonstrating group. There's a group of people that want to stop something. And that happens all day, every day for projects. What people were most concerned about is, who is it, right? Which ultimately didn't matter in the long run, because the fact of the matter was it was going to be a data center. And then 2, it was, well, where's the water going to come from? Because in the place that this was being developed, everybody is still on a well. So all their water is coming from an aquifer underneath the ground. It's not coming from the municipal water center. And they didn't want their wells to dry up. They were concerned, and valid concern, about their electricity usage. So there's multiple components to the electrical portion of it. There's the transmission of getting electricity to it, and then there's the generation of electricity. the project would have paid for all the transmission, but the generation was the next problem. So we have certain power generation sites around Indiana, and those all feed into, we're on AES, which is our power grid. They all feed into that, and the data center, going back to how much it was going to take, would ultimately, we believe, come to an increase of price for consumers down the line. And so, those were concerns, and then you had environmental concerns, in terms of, you have 470 acres where there's creeks running through. It was agriculture, so there's not trees. You don't have a lot of, nature or wildlife really going on there, but it was what is going to happen from any byproduct of this site. You had the construction for 10 years, so you had construction dust for 10 years. The quality of life for the people that live there was a major concern. When you have these buildings, I told you how long they are, but they're also 65 feet tall. And so if you've ever seen an IKEA building, that's how tall these buildings were, and they would be right next to your house.
So there was a lot of pushback from people in the public, you'd say?
There were. I was actually really proud. One, because for me it was the development type didn't fit what I'm trying to accomplish in my district. So I have what's called Washington Street in my district, which is what I call Main Street, Indiana. And I say that because we have Indianapolis, it's our capital city. Well, Washington Street runs from county line to county line in Marion County. And then right in the center of that is Indianapolis. Well, my district is the east side of Washington Street. So I say I have Main Street, Indianapolis, and I need more people to improve the economic development in my area, and I don't get people, right, from that type of development. People, and so that was, one of the many reasons that I was opposed to this project. But the pushback people had and the amount that they organized was something I've never seen in Indianapolis. So I've been a counselor, it'll be my 7th year in January, and I was able to bring in 400 people to the city-county building to remonstrate, which is unheard of. On average, we might have 30 people show up to our meetings, right? And this is our full council meeting in a city with almost 1 million people. 30 people show up on normal, right? We had 400. So people were absolutely really concerned about the development.
What steps did people in Marion County take to prevent this from happening or speaking out against this happening? Yeah,
so they actually did it in a really organized way, and which is, so this is that remonstrance group that I was talking about, right? There's always a remonstrator, there's always a petitioner. They created an organization called Protect FT. So they immediately created a website for that, and they created a petition site, and there's a popular one out there, I can't think of the name, and petitions are okay. I mean, they help. What they really help with is just showing a heat map of folks who are remonstrating, but when you put them in front of the official boards, they usually don't put a lot of credit and weight to it. They want to see physical people show up for remonstrating. But they tied all that together, and so where it was helpful to have this petition site is that if somebody were to sign up to it, now their email was collected. So they were able to start creating basically a CRM of people, so that way when information needed to go out about, hey, here's the next public meeting, we're going to talk to the petitioners about it, the Google team, or we're going to talk to the counselor, myself, about it. This is where we're going to do it. So they really helped organize and keep people up to date on information, new information that would come out, because we had about 11 different parties involved, from the water company, the electric company, the school corporation, the city, the economic development teams, Google, the remonstrating groups. There was a lot of folks involved in a lot of moving parts, and trying to communicate that to, there was, I think, 7,000 people from Marion County alone signed the petition. So to try and get them all that information, that was the best way to do it.
So we're seeing more and more data centers pop up, as you said, throughout the whole Midwest. They're moving one into Fort Wayne. They're trying to move ones into smaller areas. If, say, I found out that a data center was going to move into my rural community and I wanted to fight against it or speak up for myself, what advice would you give people in those communities to push back and advocate for themselves? Yeah, the first thing is watching for the zoning sign. At least I know in Marion County, and it's probably different county by county, but I know they have to have some sort of notification to people, and you'll see these just signs pop up in a field, and they're really small. They're, smaller than this table that we're sitting next to, but it's really understanding, trying to find it sooner than later, and it's getting organized quickly, and that means physical presence more than online presence, and I think that's something that is lost on a lot of folks nowadays, is that
if you really want to change something, you got to get together in person. That's number one. And number two is contact your local representative, because they're the ones who are going to be able to get in contact with the state agencies, the city agencies, the development corporations that are looking to actually build something. And that's what I tell people all the time, is that your counselor, your local, and it might be a county commissioner, it might be something of that nature, right? It could even be a mayor, right? But just depending on the size of the town, right? In Indianapolis, you're not getting a hold of the mayor. But get a hold of your representative that represents you directly at the closest level, because they are the ones who, they have a lot of power to be able to make a phone call and somebody's going to pick up a phone. And building that relationship with that person is really important. Now, what that person's opinion is going to really determine how a lot of things go, but making sure that person is really educated on the topic and understanding the concerns of the people that elect them is also a very powerful thing, you know. So getting organized, contacting the person that is the representative, and then, you know, being very diplomatic about the process, right? Screaming and shouting does not help anything. In fact, you lose a lot of credibility. You know, we see it all the time in the city, where I've actually been protested on a few things, but you lose your credibility when you just start yelling. And it's about having professional conversations and having facts about why this is a bad development type for your area.
All right, thank you so much. That's all the questions that I have for you, and thank you so much for coming out here and doing this interview with me.
My pleasure.
That's all the time we have today. Thank you to our guest, Michael Paul Hart, for being with us today.
And thank you for watching. See you next time on Watching Washington.